Hi guys, how you all doing? Welcome back to another video on the channel. Thank you very much for watching. I've just been inside Eddie Howe's pre-Everton Friday morning press conference, of course fresh from that defeat against Marseille during the week. It's busy times right now, isn't it? Potentially 32 games between now and the international break on the 21st of March coming up. That is, of course, if Newcastle finish out with the top 8 of the Champions League and manage to progress to the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup if of course you beat Fulham in a couple of weeks' time. So it's crazy busy times. I'm knackered. I guess you guys are knackered. I think Eddie's knackered. Let's hope the players aren't knackered for the trip to Everton tomorrow. But just to try and switch things up a little bit, Eddie decided once they landed 3 a.m. I think it was on Wednesday morning, he decided to ask the players to come back in the afternoon for a session, and then I think they had a day off yesterday. So he switched it up a little bit just to try and make the week feel a little bit longer in some extent. So let's see how that fares. And of course they play Everton tomorrow. Quite often we travel down the day before a game. Tomorrow travelling down on the day of the game to play Everton in the 5:30 kickoff. Again, just kind of elongating the week and giving the players a little bit more time at home. Now, of course, the big talking point this week, the big talking point for every Newcastle United supporter I spoke to on my 2 flights back from Marseille during the week, and every supporter I spoke to just after the game, is what is going to happen with regards to team selection this week, and in particular what's going to happen with Eddie Howe's choice as to who he will play in goals against Everton tomorrow. Pretty much everyone I spoke to on the flight home on Wednesday were of the feeling that Nick Pope should be dropped and Aaron Ramsdale should come in and take his place. I have to say the games Ramsdale's played this season, and in particular the one against Spurs in the Carabao Cup, I thought he was very impressive, good with his feet, he made some good saves. He looked the part, I have to say, and you know, I felt then he must be knocking on the door. Now obviously since then Nick Pope's gone on, had some great saves, had some good games. He's had some high profile mistakes as well, as we know, the 1 or 2 against West Ham. Probably you could blame him a little bit for the one against Brentford between himself and Sven Botman. And then the highest profile of them all this week again in Marseille, which kind of had echoes of what he did against Celtic in that pre-season friendly when he came out to try and clear it and gave Celtic an easy goal. So look, there have been mistakes, but there has been good performances from Nick Pope as well. But, you know, I took on board a lot of what the supporters were saying and just my general feeling. And I have to say, it would be, if I was the manager, probably time to make a change. And I suppose that's quite difficult to say because Pope's just been called into the England squad. Look, he had a good game against Manchester City last weekend. But I just think for Eddie to play Nick Pope again, from what the supporters have been saying, for me it would be kind of risking the wrath there, and this would be an opportunity for him to change it. And look, why bring in an England international goalkeeper in the shape of Aaron Ramsdale if you're not going to give him a try at some point? And there's still loads of games to play between now and the end of the season. You know, Nick Pope's still going to play a lot of football, so too is Ramsdale. I suppose the problem you've got is if Ramsdale comes in, the team don't play well, you lose at Everton, which was a high chance of given recent away form, then what do you do moving forward? So look, it's a huge decision he's got to make. I walked into the press conference this morning feeling that he would make a change. Ramsdale would start tomorrow. I've left the press conference thinking that it'll be Nick Pope that continues between the sticks at Everton's new stadium this morning. This is what Eddie said this morning on the calls for Ramsdale to replace Nick Pope. He said, "I need to think long and hard about who I pick in goals, and I'll try and do that on merit. I have the luxury of seeing the players train every day, goalkeepers included. You don't necessarily try to rotate a goalkeeper, it's a position of consistency." Sorry, let me just stop that call. It's a position of consistency. Changing a goalkeeper is a big call to make because defenders get used to a certain style. Changing is something for me to consider, but rotating isn't. So from that, he's basically saying that if he changes, that would then be Ramsdale getting a run in the team, which I know a lot of you guys want, probably most of you guys want. but he's saying rotating and bringing him in for one game and then putting Pope back in next midweek isn't something that he wants to do. Although saying that, I would expect Ramsdale to start. Well, I was going to say in the Carabao Cup game next week. It's a couple of weeks after. I'd expect him to start in the Fulham game, but that's a few weeks away. He then said Nick's shot stopping this season has been incredible. His saves go under the radar because he delivers so many of them that it becomes expected. The life of a goalkeeper is always on a knife edge. Nick knows that. It's nothing new to him. And he said Pope's start to the season has been very strong, apart from a couple of high-profile moments. Now, look, there has been those high-profile moments, and has his confidence been affected by that? Difficult to tell at this moment in time. I just think I think it would set a good example moving forward if Ramsdale comes in, and then certain players will know, look, their place isn't safe. Look, there is a squad. This is why we brought in two players of equal quality in the shape of Pope and Ramsdale to make the change. Look, I look back at last season when the cup final came around and Eddie was desperate to get Pope back in to play in the final instead of Dubravka. And Dubravka had been playing great, hadn't he? Made some brilliant saves, was brilliant against Arsenal in the semi-final, but there was a clear clarity that they wanted Pope in because they felt that Pope was the number one. I wonder if that's the situation again here. It wasn't clear from his press conference as to who will play in goals, but I am leaning towards it being Pope now, having walked into the press conference feeling that it would be Ramsdale. But then Eddie is also very clever as well, and sometimes he'll try and almost put a message across to us that a certain player is going to play to keep us guessing, and we walk out there thinking it'll be that player, and then come the kick-off we get a surprise. So he's clever enough to do that as well. So look, I wouldn't say it's clear either way at this moment in time, but I'm leaning towards Pope from what he's saying. However, I think if it was me, I would go with what the fans are thinking, and I would put Ramsdale in and make that change. I don't think it's going to harm anything too much. And of course, if you do lose at Everton, then you can say, well, look, I did put Ramsdale in, it didn't work, etc. Another thing, he was asked about team selection in general and how difficult it is to drop players. And he said team selection is always up there for me as one of the hardest decisions that you have to make as a manager. It's always about the players that you leave out. Every 3 days you're disappointing people and players that you love. Now I know what you guys will say here. Well, hang on, you're not, because you're not disappointing Nick Pope and we feel a change should be made. You're not disappointing certain other players. So I hear what you're saying there. I hear what you're shouting towards the phone. Eddie then says, whatever you have to do and decision you have to make, you make it on merit. Through training and games, you make honest and fair decisions. As long as I can look at myself and say that was the right call to win the next game, I'm happy with it. And then finally he said, of course I respect the supporters' opinion, but ultimately I'm paid to do the job. He was asked a direct question about the supporters feeling that Ramsdale should play instead of Pope. He said, of course I respect their opinion, but ultimately I'm paid to do this job. Alone, I have to wrestle with my thoughts. It's never a 100% to 0% decision. There's always counter thoughts, he said. While I acknowledge the supporters' opinions, I have to stay true to myself. And it was at that point that I thought, I think Nick Pope will start this game on Saturday, tomorrow, against Everton. So look, let's wait and see. It feels like it's a really big decision, because it feels very much like if Pope does start and the result isn't positive, it feels like some of the fans may turn a bit. Just from what I was hearing from those travelling fans coming back from Marseille, I'm sure some of you guys watching the video just now, from Marseille in midweek. So let's see what he does. But yeah, it would be, for me, it would be a natural time to bring in Aaron Ramsdale, see how he gets on. I think it's also important to remember that, you know, the club desperately tried to sign James Trafford in the summer. He was the number one. I felt very much like he would start the season as number two, and then once Pope started making a couple of mistakes or get injured, Trafford would come in and probably take over the gloves as a number one. When Ramsdale was signed, although it was an England international and it was seen as a decent enough signing as a number two goalkeeper, although saying that, I remember a lot of criticism at the time as to Ramsdale's signing, like a lot of fans saying, why are we bringing in Aaron Ramsdale? But obviously because the Trafford deal had fallen through, there was a lot of disappointment there. But you've got to remember he wasn't the number one choice to come in and be the goalkeeper. It was James Trafford. And I think for Ramsdale, as good as he is and as solid as he is, and he's got experience and he's played under Eddie Howe before, I think it was an opportunistic signing. I think he was there and it was like, look, let's take him. Let's take him while he's there and he's available before the whole system gets messed up and we miss out on another goalkeeper. And I think it's a bit of a reaction. It wasn't his number one choice. So if it wasn't his number one choice, is he in a position to think, I want him to come in and be the number one goalkeeper moving forward? I'm not so sure. In terms of other team selection, I know there's been a bit of criticism, or quite a lot of criticism about Dan Burn at left back. I don't see Dan Burn playing left back again. I know he played there towards the end in midweek against Marseille, but that was out of necessity. So too was the Lewis Miley at right back. And by the way, he spoke about that today and said that he actually thinks that Lewis Miley could potentially play right back. At some stage of his career, thought he's always had the attributes to play there, and it's something he's been thinking about for a while, and he thought he did really well. But in terms of other positions, he said Sven Botman today's nursing a back problem, which to me means he's going to be either missing or on the bench tomorrow. I'd be amazed if he's playing off the back of that. So I think it'll be Dan Burn at centre back, which is good. I think that's where he deserves to play. I think had a brilliant start to the season, had a brilliant end to last season, and I think the criticism towards him has been unfair. I think he's been a victim of being played out of position at left back. I think he's a stick-on left-sided centre back, and he did brilliant towards the end of last season and then at the start of this season. So I think he deserves a bit of a run there, and I think that was Eddie outlining the fact that he will start left-sided centre back. I think he'll play alongside Malik Chow. I think Fabian Schär will step back out. I don't think he can play sort of 3 games a week. And the good news is I think it'll be Tino Livramento and Lewis Hall at right back and left back. Eddie said this morning that Trippier is set to miss around a month after having a scan on his hamstring. And in addition to the Botman issue, I think it'll be a pretty stick-on Livramento and Hall, and then Chow and Burn at centre backs. He's got a big decision to make further forward as well, who he plays in attack. Voltemad will come in and lead the line because he was rested during the week. And by the way, I want to say he was rested, guys. I know there's a lot of you saying to me on the way back from Marseille, why is he dropped Voltemad? Why is he not played? He's played a lot of football. He played both games for Germany international break. He's started a lot of games for you guys since he signed, and you're going to have to at some stage rotate. There's been a lot of pressure on him. I wasn't surprised at all to see Anthony Gordon start through the middle, and look, even in defeat, I think it was probably still the right decision because Voltemad's fresh for this game against Everton tomorrow. Who will he play wide? I mean, Barnes will definitely start. He's got a big decision to make on Anthony Gordon on the other wing. I think it'll probably be Jacob Murphy with Gordon against his old club on the bench. But look, the squad's strong-ish, but when you look at Arsenal the night before, that's what you call a squad. 3 players for every position. Players like Hincapi sitting on the bench, not even getting off. Norgaard's hardly kicked the ball. They've got six top-class wingers, number 10s. That's a squad. Newcastle, it feels like the drop-off between the starting 11 and those behind there is big at the moment. It feels like Lewis Miley's maybe regressed a little bit because he's not been playing so much. Elanga's just not kicked a ball yet. Ramsey's been in and out with injury. There feels like a drop-off from your Brunos and your Tonales and your Voltemads and Chows. It feels like there's a bit of a drop-off. You don't see that with Arsenal. You don't really see that with Manchester City, and I think that's a big problem Newcastle are going to have to deal with moving forward this season. It's relentless. There's going to have to be patience. There's going to be games you're not happy with. You might even find this is a season where, in terms of the league, it's a bit of a write-off and you finish mid-table. But look, you can still have something positive about this season. You could end up winning the Carabao Cup again, certainly get into the final, I believe, and you could still go far in Europe. So look, let's everyone calm down just now. Things will work themselves out over the next couple of months. But look, the big one tomorrow's team selection. I know you guys are getting frustrated about some of the decisions. Eddie's got his reason for doing things. Personally, if I think he plays Pope tomorrow, it might be a mistake. But listening to him today, I think he'll do that. And the reason I say it'll be a mistake is because I think there'll be a backlash from certain selections of the support. So let's see what happens, guys. Heading down to the game tomorrow, so I'll have an update for you hopefully beforehand, and then my usual video afterwards. Okay, guys, nice to speak. Hope you enjoy your weekend. Speak soon. Bye bye.